Hello, 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 and welcome once again to Take Your Pick. I'm your host, Chris. I'm the one right here. And happy holidays, everybody. Not just today, of course, but any day that is a holiday for someone, somewhere. Now, it happens to be a holiday today in the United States, sure. And we just had a kind of similar holiday to that here in Canada, where I'm at. But today we've gathered a panel to celebrate holidays in general. And I think we can all agree that holidays are worth celebrating. In fact, Wikipedia defines holidays as days set aside to celebrate or commemorate an event or tradition of cultural or religious significance. Seems like something hard to argue with, but we'll see if our panelists agree or if they can push that definition into interesting new places. For our panelists are going to take turns picking a holiday and explaining why they picked it. Maybe it's a holiday they love to celebrate. Maybe it's a holiday they never had a chance to celebrate. Hey, maybe they'll surprise me with some other option. Once a panelist picks a holiday, no one else gets to pick it. And in the event that there's a question about whether something counts as a holiday, well, I'm the moderator. I get final say, but I do like celebrating. Anyway, we'll go 3 rounds. Our panelists will each walk away with a calendar featuring 3 and only 3 holidays to celebrate for next year. But who do we have here asking for the day off? Well, in the randomly determined order that they'll be making their picks, we have celebrating World Whale Day on the third Sunday in February. It's from the Sputter Inn. It's Suzanne Akbari.
Hi.
And we've got someone always ready to celebrate Leg Day from This Is Your Mixtape. It's Michael Collins.
In the words of Franz Ferdinand, it's always better on holiday.
And getting ready for August 21st and World Fashion Day from By the Bywater, it's Jared Pekacek.
Pick the day when I'm wearing just a basic t-shirt for that.
Oh, wait, is there actually World Whale Day? I didn't even know this.
Yeah, these are all real. I spent way too much time working on that intro. And, of course, as your gracious host, I, Chris, will be taking the last slice of celebratory cake, and I will take my picks last each round. Now, of course, if you're watching this live, and hopefully you are, well, or you're watching it later, but if you're watching it live, you may want to comment on any of our panelists' picks, or at the end of the show, suggest your own favorite holidays. Do so in the comments, and we will incorporate it into the show. But all that said, excellent. We will begin our holiday celebration. Suzanne, please tell us what you would like to have us all celebrate.
Well, it won't come as a big surprise to you, Chris, because you've heard me talk about this before, but the holiday I would definitely pick is my favorite is Nowruz, which is Persian New Year. And it takes place on a day that many people celebrate anyway, because it's the first day of spring. And one of the really neat things about this holiday, there are many neat things about this holiday, but one of the really neat things about it is that it's movable, but not movable in the way that, let's say, Easter or other kinds of Christian liturgical holidays are movable. It moves depending on what's happening astrologically with the position of the sun. So it's always around March 20th or 21st, but sometimes it's as early as the evening of the 19th. Sometimes it's in the middle of the night. Sometimes it's early in the morning. And you get up and celebrate it whenever the right time is. And the way you celebrate it, I won't go into a lot of detail about it, but you lay out a special kind of ceremonial table. You gather together. Usually there's some recitation from the Quran. You put like 7 objects that start with S on the table. And it's an unusual kind of holiday in many ways. And for me, it's a holiday I came to very belatedly because my family is not Iranian. But my kids are, and my partner for many, many years is. And so it's a holiday I came to when it was like, I don't know, 22, 20, 21, 22, something like that. And I just loved it. So that would be my holiday pick. And I could talk about it all day long. I will resist the temptation to do that. I love
Excellent. Yes. So we talked about this holiday a little bit not long ago.
When we did Persepolis.
When we talked about Persepolis, and which is an episode that got released on Nowruz, which was March 20th this year, correct?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And I'm sure you had lots of fun celebrations then. I'm just loading up a picture of a Nowruz spread.
I remember the story you told. It was very, very entertaining.
Good. And it has a neat little coda to it. There's this other holiday. I almost used this one instead just to like make Chris confused, which is always joyful. Sizdabidar, which is 13 days after Nowruz. It's a kind of a pendant to the main holiday where you take the green growing grass that was on your table and throw it in running water. So I almost did Sizdabidar, but I thought that was just too out of the park.
Perhaps. Here we go. Upload now. Here it is. Here we go. There's an example.
Nice. Yeah, not bad. Not bad.
I'm sure you've done better.
It has got that classic Iranian kitsch thing going. I like that a lot.
I like the fish plates.
And you see the grass at the center? That's the stuff you would throw in the water on Seas Dabby Dad 13 days later.
And then what do you do with that water?
Well, you throw it into a stream. Like you go out. It's a picnic. It's traditionally a picnic day. So you take the grass with you and throw it in the water. And the idea is that sort of takes away the cares and anything negative and sets the tone for the coming year.
Oh, fantastic.
It is. It's beautiful.
Well, I wonder if we're going to have other New Year celebrations come up. So those are interesting, or we'll talk about them at the end. It's interesting to think about what exactly we do with New Year's. But, Mikey, what is your first pick?
All right. So my first pick is Regatta Day. So Regatta Day, for anyone who doesn't know, a regatta is a series of boat races. Regatta Day is the peak of summer in St. John's, Newfoundland. It is, if I can get this correct, the oldest continually running sporting event in North America. In that it's been run every year since like 1808 or something like that. It's quite old. And basically what happens every and near the end of July. Oh my God, I've forgotten the exact date. But this is one of the points. It happens towards the end of July, but because it's a boat race and because it's in Newfoundland, the weather needs to be good. So around 5 in the morning, the regatta committee will make a call whether the day is nice enough to have the regatta. And if the weather is poor, the regatta is moved ahead a day, and then perhaps again and again. And everyone gets it off work. It is an actual like statutory holiday, but it's movable with the weather. So you're guaranteed a nice day off. And people will play regatta roulette. They'll go out drinking the night before, hoping that'll go ahead tomorrow. But if the regatta gets called off, you need to drag your hungover ass into work. So that's regatta roulette.
Good.
And people are like, I didn't know like people were so into boat racing. The boat racing is kind of just an excuse to get like 30 or 40,000 people to gather around Kitty Vitty Lake, which is this lake in downtown St. John's that's about 4 kilometers around. I used to jog around it. And it's just, it has all, it's like a county fair kind of an atmosphere. There's a beer garden. There's like all kinds of food vendors. There are games for kids. People just show up to see and be seen. The one time I took Chris there, it was so crowded we could barely move. For obvious reasons, it's not going ahead this year. And this is one of, I think, only 5 times in the like 200 plus years it's run that it's been canceled. But yeah, like Regatta Day.
The whales approve.
It was supposed to be on August 3rd this year.
Thank you. But yeah, it moves. It's a Wednesday typically, but it can move. But yes, there we go. That's Kitty Vitty Lake. That is, and it's like this basically most of the way around it. They run races all day. It is a big deal in terms of a sporting event. It's one of the main sporting events in the year. People do care about the boat races, but most of the people around the lake kind of like they'll vaguely watch the start, and then they'll sort of stop paying attention, and they row the entire length of the lake, and then they turn around and they row back. And as they're coming back, the band starts playing. The song is called "The Banks of Newfoundland," but everyone calls it "Up the Pond." So it's like so that's how you know they're coming towards the finish line. So you pay attention for that bit.
It's multiple races throughout the day.
Oh God, yeah. It's a big tournament. Like
yeah, and there's like age groups and so forth,
and gender, and yeah.
Exactly. Well, yeah, Regatta Day is a thing I got to go to, and I'm glad I got to do it, once. It's definitely a big crowd of people in the style that I don't care for. But it's also a lot like going to a fair or something, right? There's lots of booths. There's like fried food sellers and things like that. And it's usually a nice and sunny, it has to be, in fact, a nice and sunny day. So,
it can be cold. It just needs to be good rowing conditions on the pond. I have seen my breath at Regatta Day. It has been 8 Celsius, and I've gone and seen the cloud.
Excellent. All right. Well, we've started with 2 picks that were unlikely to be swiped by the other panelists. But Jared, let's see what you've got.
I've got one of the big ones. Most of my picks aren't like super personally meaningful to me. They're just stuff that I like to talk about. This one is. It's Easter. I have sort of I'm not going to get into this, but I have sort of a complicated relationship with, religion and everything. But Easter is different for me and my family in a way, because even though it's a major religious holiday, we are Armenian by descent. So even though we celebrate on like Western Easter, we have a lot of like weird little holdovers from Orthodox Easter that we do, like the food. We always have lamb. For the longest time when I was a kid, I didn't even know other people didn't have lamb at Easter. And then I found out and I was like, you do what? You have ham? Why? It's not the ham of God. And then we also do the like Easter bread, the kulich and the pashka, which is this cheese that you make and you put raisins on it that spell out the 2 Cyrillic letters. So it's this holiday that just makes me feel really connected to my family and background in a way that something like Christmas doesn't, because we just do like an ordinary Christmas. So like you bring the bread and cheese to work or to church or whatever, and you're like, oh, I made this, and everybody's like, what is that? And you get to explain. Well, it's this thing. Yeah, it's just the ritual aspect of it is really cool, even if you don't put any faith in it or anything. It's just getting to be part of this ritual that dates back thousands of years. I don't know how long. I don't know how long people have been making this bread. Yeah, it's just this moment of connectedness at the beginning of the year, sort of.
Yeah.
And you get to carry it with you, and that's the only like major holiday that isn't super commercialized at this point. We've got Easter Bunny stuff and all that, but it's like less of a thing than Christmas or Halloween or Thanksgiving. It's just
That's so neat what you say about the ritual stuff and it being like a little bit unusual relative to your peer group, and like having something to explain or something that is unique to that time of year, like the way it gives a kind of a rhythm to the holiday. That's something that's also really true of Nowruz. That's a really neat thing to hear you talk about.
Yeah.
When I was looking for images for Armenian Easter, unsurprisingly, perhaps Easter eggs came up.
Yeah, we don't actually do that.
Yeah, I was curious about that. Yeah.
Yeah, so one of the reasons that our Easter is the way it is, like our specific family Easter, is that my great-grandmother left the Armenian Orthodox Church. And it's like, screw you guys. So we still do the food, but we don't do like Easter eggs. We never went to an Orthodox church or anything. It was just like we do the it's already a lot divorced from its roots for us. But
so
not
you secularized
quite.
It.
No, because we still go to church. It's just not Armenian Orthodox.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah. There's a whole like tangle of family history here that I don't have time to get into. Yeah, so just the food and the timing and everything are what keeps us hanging by a thread to our heritage.
And that ritual of Easter, like of spring holidays, like whether it's Orthodox Easter, regular Easter, something like the Persian Nowruz, like these spring holidays, like they really tap into a really primal sense of ritual, right? It's about the days are getting longer again, things are becoming fertile again, grass is growing, bunnies are bunnying, chickens are, like all that stuff is happening. And it's neat to think about the layers of that. So like with Persian Nowruz, for example, like people who are Muslim will put a Quran on the table, Iranians who are Christian or, Armenian Christian often actually, or Zoroastrian will put their holy book on the table, right? It's clear that this is a kind of an overlay, or I don't know what to call it, maybe overlay is the wrong word, but it's a way of accommodating religious orthodoxy in spite of the fact this holiday is about other things. This holiday is about us as animals in an annual cycle of nature, right?
Yeah. Cool. You just reminded me that one of the things I like about Easter is that it does move around. It's always, every year, it's like a fun surprise. It's not like Christmas where it's like, oh God, it's looming on the horizon. It's like, oh, well, when is it this year? Let's check the calendar. It's almost like a weird kind of game in a way. Just this weird element of playfulness to just the holiday, just daring you to catch up to it. I don't know.
I also like that trying to figure out when the heck Easter should be led to so much science and astronomy and mathematics in the Middle Ages. It's like, okay, it's weird that you really want to know this, maybe, but hey, it's got you thinking. You've got to get the
timing exactly right, or God's going to cry.
Exactly.
Very delicate.
I bring up there's a lot I like about that, but I bring up the Easter eggs also because, that's one of the parts of the holiday that I'm very fond of. I like geometric things. I like tiny things. I like things in groups. Easter eggs are really great, especially that kind of Ukrainian, Armenian, etc. version of highly patterned and highly well, encoded isn't the right word, but you know what I mean. That's
Yeah.
a particular genre of Easter egg that I'm quite fond of.
There's a lot that goes into them. They are
Yes.
little works of art.
Yeah, we have a friend who makes them, and I've got a few right over there somewhere. Yeah, there it is. Maybe I'll grab them in a second and show them off because they're really great.
They're kind of encoded. I mean, the patterns are really intricate. They say something, right?
Yeah, sometimes they have specific symbols, and sometimes they're saying something through the sheer act of pattern, if that makes sense.
Our mutual friend made me one for Nowruz.
Oh, that's lovely.
It has fish on it.
That's really great.
Which is a...
Oh, perfect. It's my turn. And I think some of you probably know exactly what I'm going to start with, which is my favorite of the sort of big holidays, the big standard holidays that in North America, or this part of North America. I'm going with Thanksgiving. I'm not going to specify American or Canadian Thanksgiving because the national versions of them are, well, let's say the fables that go along with the national versions of them, I kind of have no time for. I'm not interested in the story of the Pilgrims. I'm certainly not interested in the ridiculous story that Canadians came up with of Frobisher or whatever his name is, which they only picked because it could take place 100 years before the American myth took place. That's all ridiculous. Thanksgivings were happening before the Pilgrims, and they don't have to be tied with that. So let's just put all that controversial aspect of Thanksgiving aside, and let's remember what Thanksgiving is about, which is gathering with friends and family, eating and cooking and making food for each other, etc., and thinking about, and I guess checking your privilege is the way I like to think about it, thinking about all the ways in which your life is going well, and acknowledging that that's not all your fault, that there are things happening in your life that you have reason to be thankful to something else for, whether it's whether you have whether it's God or whether it's some other force in the world. Like this idea of saying, okay, well, it's not just me. I'm going to be thankful to the people around me. I'm going to be thankful to whatever it is for you, and I'm going to eat really good things. I love all that. That's all stuff I like in a holiday. And as an American who moved to Canada, I get to celebrate it several times. Under normal years, we'll see what happens by fall this year. But under normal times, I would often have on Thanksgiving Day, on the Thursday of American Thanksgiving, we'd go out for dinner, just a small, family thing here. And then sometime that weekend, I'd have an orphans Thanksgiving, knowing a lot of Americans in Canada, we'd have a little party, and also invite Canadians, of course, because everybody should celebrate. We do that at least 2 Thanksgivings then. And then Canadian Thanksgiving is a bit more amorphous, not all celebrated on the same day. So I would have at least 1, sometimes 2. I mean, I could get a lot of Thanksgiving dinners, is what I'm saying. But of the nonsense, I do want to share my favorite Thanksgiving trivia fact, which is that in, I believe it's 1939, there was an attempt by the American president at the time, FDR. There was an attempt to change the day of Thanksgiving, which had always been the last Thursday. And that was a year in which there were 5 Thursdays. And because we were just coming out of the Great Depression, they wanted to do the thing, which is still well, maybe not anymore, but when I was a kid, it was still a thing, which is you don't start selling Christmas stuff until Thanksgiving. And so what if we moved Thanksgiving up a week? We could have an extra week of sales, and that would help boost the economy in time for Christmas. And that would be a good thing. Well, except, of course, that all became political because a lot of people, he didn't really check in with people beforehand. And he quickly got this idea of Democrat Thanksgiving versus Republican Thanksgiving. Some states went down one side or the other. Some states, like apparently Texas, just were like, you get both days off. It's fine. We're not gonna dip our toes into this. The idea that it would, and so anyway, that was a lot of confusion. But a few years later, when that came up again, it was finally decided that it was going to be the 4th Thursday rather than the last or next to last Thursday, and that's why it's now the 4th Thursday in America, which is very confusing. But Thanksgiving, that's just a weird old politics of it.
It's neat that it has that kind of resonance with the first Tuesday in November, right? That's election day, right? So this idea of first, or however manyth day of the week. That November is a very ominous month.
Yes.
Yeah, I had a friend who was convinced that gravity felt stronger in November. It's an interesting take. I'll say that for sure.
Until I started spending a lot of time with Americans, I didn't realize just how major of a holiday it is in the US, because it's always felt like a second-rank holiday to me in Canada. Like, people care, but it's not one of the biggies. Whereas like it's arguably perhaps second to Christmas for Americans, at least as far as I can tell. Like,
oh, it's part of our civic religion.
Yeah.
There are 2 Charlie Brown specials.
Yeah.
There
Oh,
are
if you
two-
get a Charlie
oh,
Brown
yes.
special, then you.
Only one of them is any good, as I
Sure.
recall. But there are 2 Charlie Brown, at least 2 Charlie Brown Thanksgiving specials. All right. Plus pie. I mean, come on. All holidays should involve pie. Oh, let me add Pie Day to my list. All right. That was round 1. It's time for round 2. Suzanne, you started with Nowruz. What are you going to add to that?
Well, there are a few possibilities here. I could use a more obscure holiday, but I think I'll take one of the big ones because maybe it'll make an interesting conversation. And I have to say, it's not a favorite holiday right now, but it's a holiday that has been a favorite at certain times in my life, and that is Christmas. So I'm a Muslim and have been since I was a young adult, but I was brought up initially like sort of baptized Catholic, like not really raised Catholic. But then my mother became a Jehovah's Witness when I was about 7, and we had that religion till I was about 14 or so. And the reason I mention this is because Christmas came and went, right? So Jehovah's Witnesses don't celebrate organized holidays, right? So, or birthdays or any of that stuff. So Christmas was a thing that was in our household, and we celebrated in a very family-oriented kind of way because my mother's family is German. So the 24th, Christmas Eve, was always the time when all the family would get together. And there's just, that kind of family ritual, same foods every year, all those kinds of things were very much part of the holiday. And I loved the holiday as a child because, of course, what child doesn't enjoy getting presents? Presents are really good. But then it went away. And when it came back, when I was about 14 or 15, I have one sibling, a much younger brother who was about 2 years old at the time. And so we started celebrating Christmas again. And it was so much fun to kind of see it through his eyes and have it be new. And so it became, I would say, for that period of time, for those years when I was a teenager, it was a wonderful time because it was strange to have it be a new holiday, but I also had memories of it from longer ago. And then when my own kids were small, it was pleasurable in that way. So I really dread Christmas now. I really hate when it's coming because I'm like, oh God, the logistics of getting people together. And oh my God, I have to buy things. I'm just like, from as soon as Thanksgiving is over, I just want to basically shoot myself. But there have been times when it was a wonderful holiday. So it's not without a certain amount of ambivalence that I put it on the table for you.
Very good. When we reached a point in our life when we could have Christmas at home and not have to travel between my parents and Michael, my husband's parents, that made me much happier because traveling at Christmas is just miserable. Always lovely to see people at Christmas, but the actual traveling is terrible. So yes,
we used to handle that. We used to handle that in a very intense way when my children were small, which was we would, because my family was living in New Jersey, and my kid's father's family in Washington, D.C. or Northern Virginia. So what we would do was celebrate at, sort of breakneck speed on the 24th at my grandmother's house. The early morning of the 25th, open presents with the kids at home, get in the car, drive to Virginia because everybody wanted us to be there. So it was like at once wonderful and truly awful. I mean, both of these things tightly gathered together.
Yeah. Christmas is like the only holiday I can think of that has that sort of excess brain melting level of excitement when I was a child. Like, that what else can get like a 10-year-old kid out of bed at like 5 a.m?
His younger sister.
Wow.
I mean, I can remember creeping out of bed and going to see in the living room the dark shapes of the presents under the tree and being like, it's too early to wake up mom and dad, but I'll get my brother, and we would wait for as long as our excited little bodies could handle, which was probably about 5 minutes.
Were you all the type of kids who wanted to peek at your presents, or did you want to keep that a mystery?
No.
Enjoy
No spoiler.
mystery.
Yeah, I never understood that idea. I mean, I sort of accidentally saw something once, and I was like, and then I had to pretend like didn't know that it was going to be what it was. And I was just like, this is terrible. I don't want to know. This is too much admin.
My mom thought on her feet so fast one time. We went to see the Santa Claus parade in St. John's, and we went back to the car, which was like an 1.5-hour drive from where we grew up. But it was the closest parade. And we went back to the car to go home, and mom opens the trunk to put our coats in or whatever, and we see something that my younger brother had asked Santa for.
Oh, no.
And we're like, hey, how come that? And she was like, oh, well, I bought one just in case Santa forgot, just to have it on hand, just in case Santa forgot. And we absolutely bought it. Like, it was
What
a
a
very,
good mom.
very
What a good
quick,
mom.
very quick buy. It totally worked.
Did you all grow up with Santa as a thing?
Mhm.
Yeah.
I held on to it too. Like I kind of like was like, it's too pleasurable for me to believe in this. So I'm going to continue to believe in this, even though I know probably it's not true. I'm just gonna like allow myself to have the joy of this belief, and I did that for several years. It's like, yeah, I know he's not real, but he's real. Like,
I don't think my parents were terribly insistent that I have to believe. Like, they weren't trying to keep me in the Santa mode, but it was certainly there. I mean, it was, it's still there in a certain sense. Like, in as much as because both my parents and my in-laws don't want to give a lot of presents, let's say, and want it to not seem like they're doing all of the present giving. They both tag things from Santa because it just breaks, and some things from them because it breaks up the monotony. So I think that's a nice thing about it.
Mhm.
My parents were always like, oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, my mother was ridiculous with the giving of presents. When I first left the house and lived with my roommate, she was all, oh, I reminded her that she's getting a present from my mother or from my parents, but my mother in particular. And it was just like, she's like, oh, that'll be nice, a little something. And I was like, no, you have no idea. And she got so much more from my mother than she did from her parents, because they were like a one gift kind of family. She was just like overwhelmed with the number of sweaters and pillows and everything else that she got. Nothing is wrong with either tradition, but
That's sweet.
oh yeah.
My family's Santa thing was, my parents didn't want to lie to us. So whenever any of us was like, is Santa real? Because, movies come out around that time that are like, oh, you have to believe in Santa or you're like a soulless gremlin. And so we would, like, younger sisters would ever be like, is Santa real? Mom would be like, well, he was. There was a real St. Nicholas. He's dead now. Don't tell your friends.
We got the Yes Virginia answer.
Yeah, no.
Santa's the spirit of Christmas and he lives in us all.
We did not get that answer. We got, here's an encyclopedia article about St. Nicholas of, Turkey, where I forget the city, but yeah.
That is a complicated thing to navigate. With my own kids, we maintained polite fictions because we celebrated like secular versions of like Christmas and Easter and stuff like that, like not the religious parts of it, right? But the secular parts. But the fiction of like the Easter Bunny and Santa was always there. And I think the reason that I was so totally gung-ho about letting this go on was not just the fact of being a Jehovah's Witness during those years, but also, and I don't remember this, I must have been completely traumatized. My mother tells this story. I must have been like 4 years old or something, or maybe 5, because I was going to school already, so 5. And I came home and had said, I guess some child had said to me that there was no Easter Bunny. And I wanted to know if this was true or not. And my mother, it's early 70s, right? She's like being a really good parent. She's like, she should not lie to her children. And she said, well, whatever, like, no, we do this. And she said that I just sort of like very soberly, like sort of nodded, went in my room, closed the door, and then she could hear sobbing. Like she's like, oh God, I'm such a bad parent.
Oh no.
I don't remember any of it, of course. The trauma was really, as you can see, devastating. So it's very hard, very hard.
Oh yeah.
Well, Christmas is a big deal holiday, but I think it's time to move on and celebrate some other things. Let's see. It is Mikey's turn. You gave us Regatta Day. What else are you going to celebrate?
Equally big as Christmas, we have Pancake Day.
Oh, good.
I believe this is not a specific to Newfoundland thing. It's very big back home. I think they have it in the UK and some other places. But this is basically Shrove Tuesday or Mardi Gras. It's the day before Lent begins. But we were a totally secular household, and we didn't observe Lent in any way whatsoever. I grew up in a very Catholic community, so the people around me were giving things up for Lent and everything. But I didn't even understand that the day before was like a last of the good times kind of a vibe. It was just Pancake Day, which is very close to my birthday, depending on where Easter is. And on Pancake Day, you have pancakes for supper, but there are things in the pancakes. So there are coins, there are toothpicks, there are buttons, there are other little things, and these all basically are little fortune-telling things. They're little portents. So we would get the coins you get to keep. So when you're like 7 or 8 years old, you can get a haul of maybe, once they brought in the loonie and the toonie, you could get maybe $5 or $6 out of your pancake supper. And if you got a toothpick, you have to be very careful. Don't take too big of a bite because you don't want to accidentally get a choking hazard. Ditto for the buttons. But these would sell. If you got a toothpick, you're going to become a carpenter when you grow up. If you've got a button, you're going to become a tailor when you grow up. And Mom would put, no joke, her wedding ring into one of the pancakes. And that was like the prize. That was, you won Pancake Day if you got the pancake with that in it. So it's just, pancakes are delicious. They're like, it's fun. It's a fun little game to play with the family. You get a little bit of pocket money when you're a kid. And it's the start of the Easter season, I guess, although it never felt like that growing up. It's just later when I realized, wait a minute, this is Mardi Gras. This is Shrove Tuesday. This is, you use up all your eggs and sugar and stuff because you can't have it during Lent. We could, but we still did Pancake Day.
Yeah, Pancake Day. Pancakes are good. We celebrated Pancake Day. There was always a big pancake. I was raised Episcopalian / Anglican, so there was always a big Pancake Day. Cook them up at the church that day. They're tasty carbs. I have no problem with that holiday.
That's so neat, this tradition of hiding things in the pancakes. I've heard of this at Christmas, like, in the Christmas pudding or whatever, but not. Yeah. I think they do that for Mardi Gras too, don't they? Like with the king cakes, they have
that baby.
The baby in it, and whoever chokes in the baby has to buy the king cake next year, as I understand it.
What an honor.
As an adult, I'm like, Mom, you put your wedding ring in there? Holy crap.
That's dedication.
Yeah. I still think it's a major choking hazard, especially toothpicks. Oh my word.
You have to cut your pancakes up into very small pieces. Like, everyone goes in knowing that this is a thing. So
when you say pancakes, are you talking about, like, I hate to say American style because I don't know if that's the right term, but like where it's like the stack of pancakes like this emoji, is that what you're talking about? Or is it more like crepes or like blini or?
Well, well, Chris, you've had my mom's pancakes and you're American, so you might be able to answer better than
my language, Chris.
They are standard pancakes.
Okay.
Like in the emoji, yes. That is what I've always had. That's what I've had that your mother made.
They're stacked in the center of the table, but you would only take like 2 perhaps on your plate at a time.
But the question of whether it's crepes or not,
God, no. Yeah, well, it would be hard to hide something in a crepe. It's so skinny.
Well, unless you made it into a anyway.
Yeah, if you fold it up, you put a
true.
Put some spinach and Gruyere in there. You can totally hide a toothpick.
No, they're basically American diner style pancakes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent. As I was looking up Pancake Day for images, which I figured everybody knows what a pancake is, but I see that International House of Pancakes has basically tried to make it as if that is their own holiday.
Oh, of course they have.
Sure.
Well, all right. Anyways, so from Pancake Day, well, Jared, you already gave us Easter. But what else are we going to celebrate?
Oh, what else indeed? Let me look at my list. I was expecting more things to be sniped. Let's go dark. So this is a holiday that I don't celebrate, but I've been fascinated with it ever since I read a National Geographic article about Naples. This is the Feast of St. Januarius. And I love it. I've never celebrated it. Again, I've never been to Naples, but every year, like once a year, not on the feast itself, but whatever, I go to Wikipedia and I'm like, did they figure it out yet? What's going on here? Because every year, 3 times a year actually, on the feast itself, and then on 2 other days, I forget what, in Naples, they bring out this vial of dried blood, the dried blood of the saint, and they parade it through the streets. I think I think they keep it in a bank vault, and they parade it down to the cathedral, and then everybody sits there and is very reverent and prayerful and everything, and they keep shaking the vial to see if it's liquefied yet, and then every year it liquefies. I think maybe once or twice in the 1,000-year history of this festival, it's not liquefied, and then that's a bad omen. And it's just so freaking weird. It's a big deal, and I'm so fascinated with it because it feels like almost like a poem. It has this weird almost like it's a metaphor for something. I don't know what it's supposed to signify when it liquefies. It's just like, yes, God is here, I think is the gist of it. But it's so weird, like a horror story even. I don't want a scientific explanation. I know people have been working on it. Like it's some kind of gel that is solid when at rest, but liquefies when shaken, that kind of thing. But like, I don't want to know. I just love the idea of this holiday where you spend a day praying and hoping that this blood will suddenly be liquid again. It's just there's this weird, eerie beauty to this rite. I don't know.
So a bunch of people from Naples left Naples and moved to America, where they landed in New York.
Yeah.
And they celebrate that holiday there in a slightly different way, as you may well know.
Yeah. They don't have the blood there.
They don't have the blood. They have a statue that they take around, and you can get drunk. And that's mainly what it is. It's a big street party. And that was where I first got introduced to the idea of a Long Island iced tea, which I did not have. My mother had. I was much too young at that point for that. But nevertheless, that's what I associate that festival with. But it does not have the mystery of shaking the vial of saint's blood.
I know in the US, it's way more of like an Italian-American heritage sort of thing. That sounded dismissive. That's not how I mean it. It's more of a heritage festival. And in Naples, it's like, I don't know what. Yeah, I don't know. I love it. I love the notion of it. Whether it's actually very fun to be there for that, I have no idea.
There are other places where they have these blood miracles and observe them at, again, the same time of year. There's one in Bruges. You ever see the movie like In Bruges?
No, not yet.
Oh, I think you would love it because the blood piety miracle, they talk about it explicitly at one point, but you can understand the movie as being kind of about that in a bigger sense. So I think you would love it. Probably,
yeah. Well, now that that's in there, I'm going to hunt it out. Put it higher on the list.
Excellent. Well, again, if anybody's watching this live and has any comments about any of the holidays that we've celebrated so far, please feel free to drop a line in the comments and we will make it big on the big screen and bring your voice into the chat. But it's also a holiday, and I understand if many people aren't watching this live because they have other things to be doing. It's one of those days. If you're watching this later, we still love you. I'm going to show off real quick. It's my turn, I believe. So before I actually start, I will show off the Easter eggs that.
Oh wow!
Beautiful.
Yeah, she's really great. And then there's one other one. Oh, that one actually has little. What do they call it? Ichthus fishes. The little.
Oh yeah, the ichthus.
Crisp. Yeah. That's not. Hold on, do I have to do the fashion blogger thing?
Whoa.
Not quite working, but
you can see pretty good.
Yeah, and then there's another one which I also quite like.
Beautiful.
Yeah, they're really cool. Yes, glad I got a chance to bring them out. So, all right. Anyway, what is my next holiday? Well, that's a good question. Which one do I want to do next? I think I'm going to do next. Let's do
the suspense is killing us.
Yeah.
It's killing me too because I hadn't decided yet because I got too excited about the eggs. Let's do New Year's Eve. Cool. New Year's Eve. Now, some of you may know I am not a party animal.
No.
And so the joy of New Year's Eve for me is absolutely not going out to a party with a bunch of people and getting trashed and blah, 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 and whatever. I don't think I've done that since my 20s. I probably my early 20s. What I like to do on New Year's Eve is sit around and be moody. I like to sit and use that as one of the natural sort of points to sit and think about what has gone on over the last year and what is going to happen next year. Not necessarily in a sense of setting up New Year's resolutions, which I don't really do because that seems silly. You need to not, you really need to not like set those to a particular date. You need to feel confident that if you want to just, stop smoking, that's a bad example, but let's just use it. If you want to stop smoking, if you want to start walking every day, if you want to start writing a poem every day, don't tie it to January 1st. That's ridiculous. Feel free to do it any day. That's a much better thing. But nevertheless, for a moment of reflection, for sitting around and thinking, how was 2020? How was 2019? How was whatever year? And, what are some broad thoughts about what I think the next year is going to be like and what I might want to be thinking about going into it? Just, a good moment for a check-in. And it's good to have those kind of check-in meta moments every so often of saying, what is going on? What has been happening? Let's just take a pause and think about it and think about what'll go down in the future. I also like it nowadays because at least while we were still visiting for the holidays out in Newfoundland, I got the fun of, Newfoundland is 90 minutes ahead of East Coast time. And so it was always fun. I always enjoy calling people across other time zones and saying, haha, we're in New Year's and you're not, or whatever. It's fun here in the new year. Everything seems to have worked out okay. But doing it on the half hour is always extra fun. So there's lots I enjoy like that about New Year's, not the partying.
Yeah, I remember when that penny dropped sometime around 25 or 26. It's like, every New Year's Eve party turns out to be an awful time. Someone's crying in the bathroom. Someone puked on the dance floor. Why?
You have very different New Year's Eve experiences than me.
Have you had good ones?
Well, so getting back to my religious heritage, wasn't Orthodox, grew up Pentecostal. So a big thing for us to do was everybody goes to the house, pastor's house or whatever. We have a party. It's a potluck. We have like chicken wings or something. And then the goal is to pray in the new year. So you sit around very quietly. Maybe somebody speaks in tongues. Who knows? Depends on how the Spirit moves you. And that's New Year's Eve. Sure. It's very quiet. Some unknown language in your ear. Nobody's drunk.
Well, the New Year's Eves at home before and after the 5 or 6 years when I tried, I did the whole mainstream North American get drunk off your face to ring in the new year bullshit. I'm sorry, I shouldn't say that. If someone enjoys that, go nuts with my blessing.
Yeah, no, if you enjoy it, go ahead.
Yeah. But even with that, we stayed home and me and Dad and my brother made some fudge and we have a little fire going out in the backyard. You still kind of hoot and holler and go kind of wild at midnight. There's something about if the Spirit moves you to speak in tongues, that's what put me in mind of this. It's well, we didn't call it speaking in tongues, but we certainly would you ululate or just make noises
It doesn't sound like that. It depending on who's doing it. It can be whooping or it can be whispering, somebody's about to come out of the mirror at you.
But yeah, it's moved to express in sort of ways. I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, it's a threshold time. It's like the big threshold time, right? We were talking about this a little bit earlier when I was mentioning Persian New Year, right? Because there you're supposed to be, the oldest person in the family usually is supposed to be sort of reciting from the Quran. You're supposed to be holding hands. The idea is that at that moment, when the moment comes, you should be in the right kind of state, right? Like what you were describing, right? So if there's speech, it should be a particular kind of speech, right? Mm-hmm. And so for Persian New Year, when the New Year comes, the first thing you're supposed to do is look in the mirror because the first thing you're supposed to see is your own image. I don't know why it's good, but you know what I mean? It's that moment is this turning point moment. And so even for the drunken revelry, it is gross when people are puking on the floor and weeping and so on. But there's this consciousness that this is the moment, right? That's why the resolutions are there. And that's so weird. I guess we need it as human beings, but it's really weird.
I'm thinking more and more it is a magical moment. What you do at that moment matters.
Yeah. Does Nowruz include a countdown?
Oh yeah. There's always somebody who's keeping the clock down to the second because it's at a different time, right? Right. Might be 3:15 and 26 seconds, or whatever. So one person is reciting the Quran, one person's keeping time.
Because I was also thinking about the way that this idea that everybody, for certain values of everybody, but you know what I mean, that everybody in the time zone in the US and Canada is counting those last seconds down, right? We're all together saying 10, 9, 8, etc. And then perhaps making a lot of hooping and hollering, whether we're drunk or not, when midnight comes. That is also a kind of, I wonder how prayer that is in a sense of being excited, wishing the best.
We're in the same time.
Yeah, and we're all gathering. We especially these days, right? We all really want this next year to be better than the last one, and this has never worked apparently. But we really are going to try, and so we're going to welcome it with all our might, and we're all going to either count out the old one on its way, kicking it to the curb, or counting in the new one as this kind of ritualistic exercise. I don't know. Mm-hmm. That might be not quite right, but it made me think of that there's a kind of devotion in the countdown that we do before New Year's.
Yeah. I almost can't believe I almost forgot this, but NTV, Newfoundland Television, when midnight hits, they begin a crawl of all of the towns and villages and communities in Newfoundland.
Oh, that's so nice.
It lasts for 20 minutes. If there's two houses next to each other, they get in there.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. It's a weird channel, but that is a really nice thing. All right. So that is the end of round 2. We've got one more holiday for everyone to put on their calendars to celebrate in 2021 or something. Suzanne, you've given us Nowruz and Christmas. So are we going to pick a third religious tradition?
This is really hard to choose. Yeah, actually, I was wavering, so I will, in fact, do that. I will choose a holiday that is from another religious tradition, and I don't know very much about this holiday, but I love the idea of it. I think it's an incredibly beautiful idea. I'll be curious if any of you guys know a bit more about it. Simchat Torah. It's so in Jewish practice, the Torah gets read by the congregation throughout the entire year, and then when you get to the end of that year, it's almost like, I don't know what to call it. It's like it's the end of the cycle, and so it's a kind of celebration that comes around it. It's usually, if I remember correctly, end of September, beginning of October. It's part of that constellation of high holy holidays that accrue around that time of year, and as part of the celebration, one of the things that happens is the Torah scrolls are brought out and carried in a commemorative kind of way all around the congregation, right? And in something, we were talking earlier about the San Gennaro festival, or the festival of the Sacred Blood in Naples for St. Januarius. It's the procession of that kind, right? So it's marking time in the sense that we're at the end of the annual cycle of reading, but we're also marking out the physical space of the, of the temple, right? And of the community, right, is all brought together by it. And just the idea that you're celebrating your book, you're celebrating your holy book. It's like, I don't know, not a birthday exactly, but you know what I mean? It's like, it's a day for the book. I love that idea. I think it's incredibly beautiful. I think we should all find some way of celebrating something like that. I love that idea. So it's not a holiday I can lay any claim to, but when I first read about it, I thought, God, this is an incredibly beautiful holiday.
It is interesting that there's no Bible Day. I don't know if there's a similar day in Islam. I don't know of one.
Well, actually, there's something kind of like it in a weird kind of way. This is actually really neat. So in Ramadan, the idea is that you're supposed to ideally sort of work your way throughout the readings of the Quran. So you read the whole Quran through Ramadan, right? Through the month of Ramadan. And there's supposed to be one particular night when the angels sort of gather, like heaven is particularly receptive to your recitation, and so on. It's called Laylat ul Qadr, the night of power. And so it's not exactly marking the cycle, but Ramadan marks the cycle, and that's the day I think that kind of emphasizes most of all the benefits of that reading. So it's not the same thing at all, but it's a nice parallel. And I wonder if there's something similar in Christian tradition. I don't know.
I don't think there is. Speaking as somebody who grew up in a very strongly Western Protestant tradition, it feels to me like in the time when a tradition like that would have arisen, the books were in the hands of the priesthood, and it was not treated as a community thing. It was something that you read from it. It was like it was a
different relationship to the book.
Yeah, so it's like on the altar with everything else, that kind of thing. It's not something you're allowed to touch. Like it was a big deal when the Bible was translated into the vernacular. Like that was, you can't do that. You got to keep it in the priest's hands. So you don't get the community relationship to it in historical Christianity, and then in more modern Christianity, where sola scriptura is the thing, whereas like only the Bible is important. It's you read it communally, but to elevate it at all in the way that other religious traditions might is like idolatry or something. I don't know. It's
yeah, that's a really neat distinction. Like so for that processional kind of purpose in Christian practice, you might use an image or something like that. That would be the way to organize the community. Like that's what you organize the community around, as opposed to in Jewish practice where people are learning Torah, and that's part of coming of age and so on, is that mastery of a certain level. Same way for Muslim people, the idea that, memorizing parts of the Quran is something you're supposed to be doing. Ideally, all of it if you can, right? But at least some of it, right? So it's a different relationship that's being set out.
Yeah.
But I think this idea of celebrating the book, whether it's a holy book or a book you yourself really like, I think that's an awesome idea.
I'm thinking about Bloomsday.
Yeah.
Well, I was debating whether to mention it. That was on my. It was not something I was planning on picking, but it was on my long list. But as a day that you celebrate James Joyce's Ulysses, and it is kind of, delightful that there's a book that's just meant to a day rather that's meant to remind you of this secular, but nationally somewhat important. Anyway, a specific book, and that you it's a challenging book, and it encourages you to give it another try. It's a very beautiful book to sit and read aloud or hear people reading, and there are often public readings of it. Like, it's a secular version. It's not quite a secular version of that holiday, but it is not entirely unlike it, let's say. Yeah, I think it's great, and I think there are other holidays for other books as well along those lines. But I don't want to say too much, just in case anyone has something like that on their list. So we will move on. That was terrific. All right, Michael, you gave us Regatta Day and Pancake Day. What Newfoundland holiday is number 3?
I did promise in the Slack that I would do only Newfoundland things, and I have several here to choose from. But I'm going to go with Tibb's Eve.
What?
Tibb's Eve. The Eve of Tibb's, the Eve belonging to Tibb. That is December 23rd. It's Christmas Eve. And it is a Newfoundland holiday which has become a kind of a pan-Newfoundland thing in the last 10 or 15 years. Growing up, this was not a thing. But they did it in the southwest corner of the island. And what's very interesting to me is Newfoundland is a large island. It's bigger than Ireland. It's smaller than Great Britain. It's kind of like an in-betweeny size. But it's big enough that there's a lot of regional variation. But because in the context of Canada, it's a very small island, and it's sort of a very, there's 500,000 people living there, give or take. It's not important economically. It's not important culturally. It's small. It's on the margins. People don't bother to learn about it, and they're kind of not wrong to. I don't expect them to. So there's kind of this flattening that happens where things that used to just be perhaps in one small corner of the island, when people become aware of them, the rest of us can just sort of latch onto them and be like, oh, that's all of us now. Tibb's Eve is a great idea. The whole point of it is Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, you're spending time with your family. They're sort of quiet in the house. Or if you're leaving the house, it's to go to your mom's or something like that. Whereas Tibb's Eve, the 23rd of December, is the day you go out and you get completely shit-faced with your friends.
So all the Newfoundland holidays are like that, is what you're saying.
I'm trying not to enact the stereotype that we're all hard drinkers, because I myself pretty much don't drink. But kind of yes. But yeah, so the point of it is it's like a day to hang out with your friends and have a party, because the 24th, 25th, 26th, you're going to be, it's family time. And so that was just around Port aux Basques and Burgeo and places like that. And then sometime in the early 21st century, it got to be across the whole island. People were they heard about it and they wanted to take part of it, and it was a Newfoundland thing that they could feel good about, and sort of with the mainlanders don't know what Tibb's Eve is, but we do. And it's guys, in the 80s, we didn't do this in Placentia, but we do now. So anyways.
Do you do it now, other than in any meaningful way? I'm
too old and I don't drink, so and it's really interesting to me because there are other traditions like mummering and so forth, which people do over the Christmas period in general. It's kind of almost a Halloweeny sort of thing where you disguise yourself and you go around houses and you speak aggressively like this. So you disguise your voice. You talk on the inhale. And your neighbors are supposed to try and guess who you are.
That's so weird.
The whole thing. It's kind of eldritch and creepy. Numbers are amazing, and I was looking for a way to bring them up. But you're supposed to do those over the 12 days of Christmas, and Tibb's Eve is specifically before Christmas proper. So those two sort of pan Newfoundlandia, rah-rah, our culture kind of things, I don't think intersect. It would be interesting if they began to.
It's interesting to see that sort of grasping for a holiday to bring more meaning and cohesiveness to a group in the situation that Newfoundland is in, as you described. Yeah, I don't know if I have anything more to say. That's an interesting, like that as a reason for holidays to become more prominent, right? Is because there are these political and cultural urges to form connections.
Sure, like holidays have a lot of purposes, and one of them is group identity. So if a group is feeling under like sort of threat of losing some cohesion, it can sort of cling to some holidays as a way to sort of bolster its groupness.
Yeah, exactly.
Who is Tibb?
I don't know. Sometimes it's Tips Eve as well. I think it might be sort of like a play on Tipsy.
Oh.
So Saint Tibb, according to everyone's favorite source, Wikipedia, is attributed, at least, to a character that appears in 17th century English plays. But you know, and so there was an expression of Tibb's Eve as if something happens on Tibb's Eve, it's like happening on the 4th of Never, right? Or February 30th, or yada yada yada.
Oh, that's perfect for Newfoundland. We are the impossible island. We are out of time with the rest of the world.
Exactly. So yeah, it comes up in a few different places in England and Ireland as a thing, but only became a proper holiday in Newfoundland, and eventually became Tipsy Eve. But I think that is a joke based on Tibbs sounding like Tipsy. Yeah, exactly. Well, that is a fun holiday. For sure. I also like that it's another sort of secularization of it while serving other purposes. Tibbs Eve. All right, Jared, you gave us Easter and the feast of Saint Januarius. What is your third holiday?
So I've got a lot of fictional holidays on my list, but I think I'm going to make my third choice a real one. I'm going with Indigenous Peoples Day. I don't know if we have any viewers from outside the US or the Americas, but this is basically just observing Christopher Columbus's landing in the New World. And for a very long time, it was just Columbus Day. But in recent years, there's been a movement to retitle it Indigenous Peoples Day. And that hasn't happened on a national level yet. It's just been regional. It was a big deal in Seattle a few years ago when just municipally it was Indigenous Peoples Day. And it's part of the whole thing that the US is going through right now. We were talking about holidays being like markers of like a way to bring people together or like unite. And this is a very divisive choice. It's part of the US trying to, or some parts of the US trying to acknowledge, make up for, move on from various sins in our past. I really like that it exists, but I've chosen a holiday I'm ambivalent about, because I think unless you are actively doing something to help the people that this holiday hurt, then it's just rebranding. It's nothing meaningful. So yeah, it's really interesting just to, in a bad way, be alive at this time in history, and watch as old stuff goes away, gets renamed, gets torn down, gets red paint splashed on it. And I think this holiday is one of the first tremors of that movement when it was renamed. For some people, it's by no means renamed across the country. I hope it eventually is, but yeah, I like that we're trying on some level.
I'm glad you brought that up because, you know, as you say, we were talking about holidays and group identity and the kind of work they do. One of the weird things that's happened this year, in this weirdest of years, weird in so many years. So I'm right now in North Truro out in Cape Cod, and it's a place where they were having a lot of excitement around the fact that in 2020, it's the 400th anniversary of the Pilgrim landing, right? And a certain kind of mythic history of America, right? And there's a lot to say about that. And even though, you know, Plymouth Rock is the sort of monumental site of that landing, the first landing of the Mayflower, as they will always tell you up here, was actually here in what's now Provincetown, just right like by where we are. And so on the one hand, there was an eagerness to celebrate that, but there was also an awareness that you also, in the same way that Columbus Day and Indigenous Peoples Day are two sides, two ways of seeing one particular turning point in time, that this 400th anniversary was going to have that same character. And there's the people here were Nauset people, but that's also part of the larger Wampanoag group, and the people from that nation are still present here on the Cape down in Mashpee, and they've been very active in planning. So we're in this weird time where holidays that have served a particular kind of function and commemorations of time that have served one kind of function, they're like tipping in the balance, right? And while there are many people who have been actively thinking about and working toward revisioning those holidays for a long time, like the ground is shifting under our feet in a way that's in some ways difficult, but in some ways incredibly exciting. Right.
Yeah.
And so you put your finger on a really important one of those.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I like how you pointed out, like, it needs to not just be a new name. There need to be things. But because this is sort of like a new holiday, we don't yet sort of have these things in place. But, like, you know, there are traditions on any holiday that's sort of old enough to have them. So it's like, this is still sort of in formation. Like, what do we do on Indigenous Peoples Day? Like, we sort of acknowledge Indigenous people, but what does that mean? What does that look like? What are the actual activities you're going to do? Are you going to read some Indigenous literature? What are you going to do? And it's going to be interesting to see how that takes form.
It's especially complicated in places specifically like Seattle, which has been getting a lot of attention recently, where it's very much an aesthetic of acknowledgement and acceptance.
Yeah.
But we are on occupied Salish and Duwamish territory. We ignored several treaties in order to become the city that we are. The Duwamish tribe still doesn't have legal recognition. It's a holiday that the renaming seems almost intended to get some people off your back. And that's it.
Yeah.
It's like land acknowledgements, right? Like, that's fine, but the minute it's just a check the box kind of thing, that's a huge problem, right? So you keep remembering, what is it for? What is supposed to be unsettling? What is supposed to be difficult about it?
Yeah.
And there's a huge opportunity here to figure out, what do you do?
Yeah.
Right? How do you listen? What do you do?
You do the work.
Yeah.
That's a good holiday.
Yes.
Well, I have to end it with another holiday. That would have been a lovely note to end on. I'm going to, before we do that, though, we have a comment from Nadia, who talking about the inhaled speech.
Yeah, that's so creepy. What is up with that?
There's a tick. A tick is probably the wrong word, but a dialectical thing in Newfoundland English for some people, which is also found in a few other places in a few other languages, which is that there are certain phrases that you might inhale, in particular, yes, or similar words. Yeah. You just, that's how you say yeah, instead of saying it exhaling like normal, is that you inhale it. Now, the first time that my mother-in-law and her sisters were coming over having a cup of tea at our place here, the first time I was spending that much time with them, and they were all talking, and it was all lovely, and I'd met them before, but like the first time they were all in a group, and they were just like, yeah, oh yeah, and I just like, these people are having heart attacks left, right, and center. Like, I knew what was going on, but part of my instinct was, oh no, something terrible's happening. It was very odd to get used to. I did, of course, and I think it's great now. It's just a thing to get used to. So I'm going to.
Oh, where did Chris go?
He's going to vanish.
Whoops! I'm going to hit the wrong button.
That was exciting.
Surprise!
I'm going to pick a holiday that doesn't exist yet, that I celebrate, sort of. And I'm a little sad that we didn't really get any fictional holidays. This is, I guess, the closest thing we're going to get to that. Oops, let me see if I can spell it right. Yes, I'm going to call it. Oh, sorry, it's hard to do this while talking. actually with a tricky word to spell. I'm going to call it Interdependence Days. And what I mean by this are those two curious days, curious at least for those of us who grew up in one of these two countries and lived in the other. But the days between July 1st, Canada Day, and July 4th, Independence Day in the US. I moved to Canada a long time ago now, something like 12 years ago, I think. I moved to Canada 12 years ago and for grad school. So, for to be in September. But I was in a position where I basically wanted to get out of Portland, where I was living before, as soon as possible at the beginning of the summer, rather. I just wanted to get used to Toronto and enjoy living there for a bit before grad school started. So early July was when I was going to move there. And I had a few options that I could have moved on Canada Day, but that seemed a bit weird. And I could have moved on the 4th of July, I suppose. Probably would have been cheaper, but that also seemed a bit weird. So I ended up moving on the 2nd. But I thought of these two little days in between these two very patriotic national holidays. And they create a kind of liminal space, right? And I kind of like thinking about that space, both as somebody who has lived in both countries and as somebody who's not super comfortable with patriotism. Now, there are ways of being proud of where you're from, of the country that you're in, while still acknowledging the flaws and the terrible things that both countries have done. But, they've both done some wonderful things, I suppose. And you can also still sort of, you don't want to hate where you're connected to. And I understand that. I guess I don't have as much of a sense of rootedness in general, unlike some people. So the idea of caring a lot about someplace because I happen to be from there is a little weird to me, but people are different, and that's fine. I'm not interested in judging others. But this moment of thinking about this space between these two holidays and thinking about, what lies in there? What is the space sort of adjacent to it and in between it? And thinking about other ways that we can live in the middle, or we can live next to this desire to celebrate these countries and this desire to have a kind of knee-jerk reaction of just saying, well, no, they're atrocious. They've committed all sorts of genocides and atrocities and that are still ongoing. Okay, well, is there a space in the middle, and what value is there to that? I don't want to, I'm not trying to minimize any of that, but just being in that space. So I keep lining things up to happen on these days. And, it's no surprise that our cat, whose birthday is somewhere around there, we decided to observe it on July 3rd. There's the day that I moved to Canada, and there's the day that our cat was born. And these are the two things that happen in between Canada Day and Independence Day.
That's awesome.
I like interdependence because it's it's kind of the opposite of independence, I suppose. It's the idea of interbeing and the fact that we all depend on each other. And I think that's something that we need to acknowledge a lot more.
Yeah, exactly. I haven't really, I've never properly come up with the phrase. That is just something I thought of today, but I do like it. I'm going to be thinking about it for a bit today. And then hopefully next year I'll remember to think about it. Because that's one of the nice things that you can do on a holiday is use it to, at the very least, think about things. Mm-hmm. I mean, obviously you want to do things too, right? As we were saying with Indigenous Peoples Day, thinking about it, even if assuming that most people do, is still not enough. You have to then move on beyond thinking about it into doing things to solve problems or to acknowledge the realities that thinking about it made clear. But yeah, interdependence is a good thing. I don't know if there's anything we need to do to make interdependence more real, but certainly it's worth trying to get away from any sense of especially in America, this sense of we're the only place that counts.
I've got this.
Well, you see this, this was playing out. We're talking about it in terms of the specific holiday of Columbus Day, Indigenous Peoples Day, or the 400th celebration of the Pilgrims, the two ways of understanding that. And in yesterday's, I don't know what adjective or noun to associate with, yesterday's event at Mount Rushmore.
Yeah. Totally not in the spirit of Interdependence Day.
Oh my God, right? But I mean, thinking about, what does that site represent? What could that site represent? How do we think about that past, and how do we think about a future? And can we do it in terms of interdependence? And what would that look like? There's a lot to think about there. So thank you for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So before we list off our final thoughts and what else was on our list, I do want to have a little bit of a moment of wrapping up, of closing statements or anything like that, one of the things in this discussion that's really struck me was this idea of holidays, which we think of as being like things that have been celebrated forever. And sometimes they have been celebrated for very long times. But nevertheless, there's still something very unstable about them, right? They still change meaning. They can still change days. They can still be something that was celebrated in one way. You know, the Feast of San Gennaro in Naples is quite different from the Feast of San Gennaro in New York City. The Tibb's Eve changed from a local Newfoundland holiday to something that is now being celebrated for a somewhat different political purpose across the island, and maybe it will soon be celebrated even more as well by diasporic Newfoundlanders.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
Like this idea of the instability of holidays, and the fact that we can just say, well, here's a holiday, here's a new one. Let's all celebrate Talk Like a Pirate Day. Let's all celebrate. Let's not.
I hate that so much.
But let's celebrate May the 4th. Let's celebrate Bloomsday. Let's celebrate something else that we can add holidays. Let's change our holidays to make them more reflective of our values. And think about what it means to celebrate Indigenous Peoples Days. Like there is a certain amount of again instability, but also like permission with holidays that I think can be really exciting.
Well, Juneteenth, right? There are people who've been celebrating that for quite some time, but there are other people for whom this spring and early summer has brought an awareness of that holiday that they might not have had before. And thinking about what could that mean going forward? How could you, like we were saying, how could you observe that? What would be a meaningful way to carry that into the future? Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was on my list of one of the things I thought about talking about.
That was also on my list. If anybody doesn't, unless somebody else has something else they want to say about holidays in general, the things that they've been thinking about during this conversation, we can move on to the naming your picks. And it looks like we're ready to. So if you are watching, and it may just be Nadia at this point, I'm not sure, but if you have a holiday that you wish that you've been thinking about or that you would want us to talk about, feel free to comment it and we will bring it up at the end of this. But we will go around and now everybody will list the other things that were on their short list. Suzanne, you had Nowruz, Christmas, and Simchat Torah, three holidays from three different faith traditions. What else has been on your mind?
So for my Bring Out Your Dead round, I had the summer solstice on there, which isn't a formal holiday as such, but always feels like a turning point in a very sort of organic sense in the year. And so I have things to say about that. April Fool's Day, which I don't actually like, but my grandmother loved. She loved it. She was a ridiculous person. She loved that. She loved playing practical jokes, and she would like laugh in this really upright. She's a really tiny little like woman. She's hilarious. And so when the April Fool's Day comes out, I always think about her. So that's nice. Another one I had on here, again, I kind of hate the holiday itself, but I'm interested in it. Remembrance Day, November 11th, not because of what it commemorates, whether it's understood as Veterans Day or Armistice Day or Remembrance Day or whatever, but a number of personal things happened to me on that date. Like the person that I was with for a long time was the dad of my kids. We met on that day. My second daughter her due date was that day. She wasn't born then, but her due date. So whenever the holiday comes, I think about things like I remember. So it really is like all holidays were remembrance days in a way. So that's why I had that. And Juneteenth was the other one I had. So.
Excellent. Michael, you gave us Regatta Day, Pancake Day, Tibb's Eve, a real whirlwind of the hits of Newfoundland's holidays. What else was on your mind?
Hyper local. So I had a couple of other Newfoundland-ish ones here. I have Lady Day, which is August 15th. Which is celebrated in a bunch of places, but it manifests in Newfoundland particularly as the day when the catch of fish for that day goes to the church. But it also tends to be sort of garden parties and like dances at parish halls and things like that. I have Old Christmas Day, the 6th of January. Nothing special happens then, but I like it. My favorite of the big holidays is Halloween. And we didn't get to talk about it, but we'll probably have a whole Halloween episode at some point. Very complicated relationship to St. Patrick's Day, which is a statutory holiday back home. July 1st I have down as Dual Day because it is Canada Day, but in Newfoundland it is also Memorial Day. And we have we only joined Canada in 1949, and like in 1916 we were completely wiped out over in Europe in the First World War. And so we have this sort of like up until noon, it's this very somber Memorial Day. And then afternoon, you like go to the park and like there's fireworks and cake because it's Canada Day. I have American Thanksgiving because I like it better than Canadian Thanksgiving. And I have birthday, which I think is really interesting because it's different for everyone. It's the day you get to decide what your birthday look like, how much or how little you want to celebrate it. If you have a tradition, if you have multiple traditions, I like to take it as a very quiet day of self-reflection. I like to sort of look inward. I like to spend some time alone. But because I have really excellent friends that keep baking me cakes and throwing me parties. So...
Very good, very good, very good. Okay, Jared, you are celebrating Easter, the feast of Saint Januarius, and Indigenous Peoples Day. What else have you been celebrating?
The rest of mine are all fictional.
Yay.
Because I was afraid the big ones would get taken. And then I went with them anyway, so whatever. Captain Picard Day.
Yes!
Because it's really cute. You get to see a really vulnerable side of this guy who's normally pretty straight-laced. Makes the Enterprise feel like a bigger community. It's fun. It's really funny. Anyway, The Long Dance, which is a summer solstice celebration from the Earthsea series, which is just really cool. It's the only holiday that everybody in that world celebrates. Summerween, which is a Gravity Falls holiday that's just like Halloween in summer. And it's actually one of the series' best episodes, but that's unrelated. And Life Day from the Star Wars holiday special.
I wondered if that was going to make an appearance. Yes.
It's so awkward.
It
Like a
is.
lot of holidays on occasion. So
Very good. Well, my choices were Thanksgiving, no nationality specified, New Year's Eve, and Interdependence Days, i.e. the days between Canada Day and American Independence Day. The other ones, let's see, what else did I have on my mind? I also had birthday, which if somebody had snagged New Year's Eve and talked about it in some other way, I would have talked about using birthdays for self-reflection also. Mine is in the middle of the summer. It's in a month, basically. And so it serves as a nice bookend to New Year's Eve. I get to do it twice a year. I have a nicely timed check-in to do that kind of thing that I was talking about earlier. I also had Juneteenth on my list. I had Bloomsday, which I mentioned, celebrating James Joyce's Ulysses, which is also the day that we got married, which has, not because it's Bloomsday, but boy, it makes it easier to remember. I put Decemberween down, which is just the Homestar Runner version of Christmas. But I like the name a lot. I put down Friendship Day. Not a particularly interesting holiday, but as somebody whose birthday is in August, that was the only one that would show up on calendars. And I learned that it was originally meant to be August 2nd, which is my birthday, but in fact, it has seemingly been moved to July 30th, thus defeating the entire purpose. So Friendship Day is, July 31st, I believe, but it's no longer a friend of mine because it's not in August. I had Pride, which is, I could have had an interesting conversation about holidays that I'm glad happen, that I don't particularly do much to celebrate personally. But I'm glad that other people get to celebrate them in the ways that they like to. And obviously, I'm glad the holiday is there. It's like the wilderness. I'm glad it's out there. I don't need to be there, but it makes me happier knowing it's out there.
and it's full of bears.
And it's full of bears, indeed. I put Pi Day down as an example of a fun, silly holiday that people are coming up with, and and I had one more, which was December 16th. Is not an important holiday for me. It's an important holiday for Schroeder, who is the piano player in Peanuts. It is Beethoven's birthday. And I bring that up just to mention that the amount that he gets excited and that the strip got excited about Beethoven's birthday coming up, the strips with Snoopy holding a sign saying 7 more days until Beethoven's birthday. That's great. Just find a holiday and celebrate it just because you want to, just because it's important to you. Nobody else has to agree with you, but you can still make a big hoopla about it. And that can be really beautiful. So that was my final thought on holidays. It doesn't look like anybody has left any comments, alas, but I hope anybody who has watched this has enjoyed it. And I would like to thank everybody who watched, and I'd like to thank our panelists once again for taking some time out on this holiday of one sort to talk about holidays of, for the most part, other sorts. So thank you, Suzanne, Jared, and Mikey for joining me. And I had a lovely chat. And we will see you all next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Hold on. Let me play that music.
Yeah.
There it is. It's a party. Take your pick day. Basket is just sweltering in the heat here.
Aw.
Oh, well. She was in the stream for a little bit, I think.
That's what
I have to run and make cake.
Cake.
That's a good way to celebrate.
it